The time has come. Welcome back to conversations about denominational history with the three of us. And unfortunately, it is my turn, which is not fun for me, but good and important and all helpful conversations. So, you guys, I am like a brand new baby to the UCC, and so a lot of this was just both new information, new history for me, but also just a lot of digging because I did not grow up in this church. Leah, I actually grew up in the Methodist church. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, I did not. I
Yeah.
did. We could
You
do a.
didn't?
No, I didn't grow up Methodist or
That's
UC.
flip-flop.
But anyway, I'm gonna.
Yeah. So, and I think what's one unique thing about the UCC is that similar to my being a baby in it, it's kind of a baby denomination. So it didn't ultimately form until 1957, I believe. I have a really, this has always helped me. Of course, it came from Scott C. But this little chart shows the way that the UCC formed. And then I have that quote at the bottom left there, which has been a theme that's come up for us that, this formation was about that all may be one. And so these four prongs, eventually moved into the congregational churches and the evangelical Reformed Church, which eventually led to the merging in 1957. And that's helpful because one of the things I came across is that the history of the congregational church was much different than that of the Reformed, as you can imagine. Sorry, I can't see this. Okay. So I found this great article by Jeremiah Wright, who led Trinity UCC in Chicago, as is well known. And this article was the African American contribution to the UCC. But he also talked a lot about some of the timeline information prior to that 1957 forming. So he talked about how African Americans primarily came through two of the primary streams, being the Congregational Church of New England and the Christian Church. One of the most interesting things here for me was that, which I had known, but I hadn't really looked into much, that the Congregational Church took a very strong stand against slavery as early as the 1600s and also played a major role in the Underground Railroad. What else is important here? I mean, the rest is kind of just like you can read on your own. The largest number of African Americans who became a part of the UCC prior to the Union were actually from the Christian Church, which is, you can see English Christian connection. So this, one of the things we're all kind of reporting on is the Black Manifesto response, which was interesting. And one of the very few things, it was so hard for me to find stuff until Leah, you sent me that article, but one of the few things I did find was a 1969 article in Christianity Today, which was problematically titled, "Black Threats Move United Church of Christ," and said it was requested that the 2 million member UCC should pay 140 million in reparations to underwrite such projects as Black Printing Press, Black University, Black Radio, TV networks, and Southern Land Bank for cooperative farms. So, okay, what was interesting about this, so Leah, when you then sent me this document, which, is this a public document? This got to be, right?
I didn't pay anything for it. I don't know.
Okay. Maybe we can link, like we could probably link to it.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Cool. So this document goes over kind of the different denominational responses. And so because this was taking place around the General Synod, Foreman, who is the author, of the Black Manifesto, along with the NBEDC. Remind me what that stands for.
National Black Economic Development Conference. Yeah.
Yes.
There's too many C words that mean a collective of people doing something. So.
Right. So originally, President Ben Moore Herbster had no response. So Foreman and some of his followers came to the 16th floor of the Inner Church Center, the UCC's Board of World Ministries, and occupied the offices. And they took over use of the equipment on behalf of the NBEDC. So the UCC staff members were allowed on the floor, and during the 2 days of occupation, the UCC shared information with the occupiers about their work, which the relationship of their work and what the Black Manifesto was requesting was kind of two different things. Yeah, so after 2 days of occupying the offices, they left and did so with the knowledge that the UCC would take the demand seriously. So they answered Foreman more formally and concretely during their synod, which was 12 days later. So, yeah, I think one of the important things here is that it was very clear that the UCC, with a 2 million membership, should pay 140 million in repairs. But the synod, like most of what we've heard from other denominations, reacted with a challenge or like a counter offer. So what's interesting is at this time, so Albert Cleage Jr., Reverend at the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Detroit, was very supportive of Foreman and this request, and Albert Cleage was well known. And so, you can imagine where this goes, but the response was essentially paying 500,000. Okay, the commitment was the UCC Committee for Racial Justice would be a permanent church commission with a voting majority of Black churchmen, a budget in excess of 500,000 a year, initial informational studies by appropriate agencies about the UCC's cooperation in the establishment of Black University, establishing a Southern land bank and Black publishing and printing industries, initiating a new decision-making process for investment policies in which Black members of the UCC would be given a share of responsibility, and finally urging that all denominational funds withdrawn from financial institutions doing business with South Africa. But of course, then this president guy, Ben Herbster, just totally push back on the language, push back on everything, and just
I can't get like the title of that article is so incorrect. Like Black threats, there were no threats, there was no or else, and then move UCC. No, it didn't move anybody, so there were no threats. Nobody was moved. But that's how they frame it to sound like white victimhood.
Right.
It's an amazing magic trick that we can do over and over and over again, is to come out the victim.
Yeah. So,
No, I just think it's also interesting, like, we've talked about a little bit just this idea that, should we keep trying this like denominational stuff? Like, is it time to burn it all down? And I think an interesting question is like, okay, burn it all down, or if denominations don't fundamentally change the way they do things and how they respond to like legitimate grievances, if they don't find it in themselves to change, it's not a matter of burning it down so much as it's going to collapse. Like there's there's not enough life there to sustain itself. If you want to just keep closing your hand tighter and tighter. And that's what I see in a lot of these responses and what you're describing. It's just like this thing that has the power to transform our denominations, like actually working for justice, working for a world where like people have equal opportunity, that thing that could actually save denominations is perceived as a threat. So that it's this idea that like, well, we can talk about burning stuff down, and I think there are places for that, but that burning being kind of a purifying thing. Say like burning away the things that you're holding on so tightly to that are gonna kill the denomination anyway.
Yeah. You're reminding me of something else Foreman said when he was at the UCC General Synod and being clear about the demands of the manifesto. He said the spirit of capitalism is contrary to the spirit of Christianity. And in that sense, he asked the assembled to comply with the demands, which is also right. The spirit of capitalism is also a very white supremacist notion, like productivity, and overwork and perfectionism, and it's going to always fail. It's going to always fail the expanse of human needs and human liberation. Like Christianity is a slave to capitalism, right? We were talking a little bit earlier about like church dynamics and how smaller churches are more punished than big churches because the big churches make more money so they can get away with stuff, but the little churches can't. Okay, I will finish up with a few more points. Again, messy, out of order, I'm learning, but some important points that came up that I found interesting, all related to decisions being made at our general synods. So I guess one important one to point out here is that an addendum at the 23rd General Synod was added to also become an anti-racist denomination. In doing so, we encourage all conferences and associations and local churches of the UCC to adopt anti-racism mandates, including polity that encourages anti-racism programs for all UCC staff and volunteers. I emphasize encourages because that language is very obnoxious to me and points to the UCC's kind of obsession with church autonomy. And just the way I see it in the context of this conversation is that autonomy is overvalued in the ways that it doesn't that should be an expectation of all our churches to be anti-racist and have anti-racist aspects happening within the church and work being done. Now, like the tension I hold with that is that autonomy is beautiful in the ways that, like, as I pursue ordination, I think about things bubbling up that I don't have to push down, that I can speak to, that I can be vocal about, that I can be clear on, because church autonomy also means that we get in the 1960s an Reverend Albert Clage Jr., who speaks to the truth of the Black Messiah, who is also identified as I believe, Pan-African Orthodox Church. So you get that, and then you also today get, because of church autonomy, you get churches in all kinds of different places that continue to not be open and affirming, or continue to not have any anti-racist initiatives or anything like that. So the tension of that, yeah.
I don't know that I want to give the UCC like too much credit for Albert Cleage or Jeremiah Wright, or especially because I get the sense that like they want to take a lot of credit for them. And like, these are like the poster people for how anti-racist and great and progressive the UCC is, when, I think the reality is that, these leaders were going to be leading and doing the amazing things they're doing, no matter what, no matter where they landed. So I hesitate to put all of that success like on the resume of the UCC,
Right. And to your point, if I was doing this research in like the 1970s, their names would not be popping up. But now it's like safe to claim them. You know what I mean? Like, to your point.
It's like with MLK, now everybody loved Martin Luther King Jr. No, they didn't.
Yeah.
It's now that he is safely dead, there's a poem and I'm forgetting the author's name, now that it's popular and now that the Black Manifesto is over and nobody is actually looking at us and saying, do something about this, now we can celebrate the Black leaders in our congregation. But back when there was a threat on the table, which is crazy, stupid. But also I wish they thought of it as a threat, because then maybe they would have done something. So anyway, they're heroes now because it's the cool thing to do, and there's no demand on the table. It doesn't cost them anything to heroize Jeremiah Wright and Albert Cleage.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to look for something. Yeah, I want to read this to you because this is something that, like, while we might claim Albert Cleage now, or, honor Jeremiah Wright's work now. So in The Black Messiah, Albert Cleage's book, he describes looting and rioting as a mystical kind of thing, saying people loot stuff they don't even want, but there was a sense of defiance in the very nature of the retaliation. So he goes on to say, you actually hit the white man hardest when you tear up his property. Perhaps those who loot and burn don't have any real revolutionary philosophy, but they do know one simple thing: tear up the white man's property and you hurt him where it hurts the most. The reason I share that is because even though we claim Albert Cleage now and Jeremiah Wright now, we still won't talk about and lift up their words of truth like that. Like, that's holy, that's prophetic words. But how dare we call rioting and looting prophetic or mystical or of mysticism? Like, I think we still fail their ultimate message, and the ultimate message too.
And I also think a big part of, so like going back a little bit to this idea of like congregational autonomy, we have that in the Disciples of Christ. But a huge issue I have with that is that we're supposed to have autonomy with the big caveat's not the right word, with the big expectation that all congregations will be in covenant with one another. So like, I think when we're talking about the UCC claiming different things, it's like, are you actually in covenant with those congregations that you're like really valorizing? And then are you saying like, I'm going to be in covenant with congregations who are not open and affirming? Like, are you going to talk just as loudly about like, yes, we have all of this under our large tent or whatever? We're disciples, we're all about this enormous tent, which I'm like, okay, fine. But I do think this idea of there's not really a way to enforce, well, we've not really tried to enforce covenant, from what I can see. So like, I mean, I would just need to look into this more of like what that means, like how we're going to be accountable to each other as congregations. But it's like just this very American thing to be like, we're gonna have this autonomy and forget about everything else. Like, because what really matters is individual freedom, and that is such a cultural value, like, of the United States. So like, and not this really what could be really beautiful. It's like, yes, we are independent, and because of that independence, we know that our responsibility to each other is even greater because we don't have someone telling us how to treat each other right. So like our personal responsibility toward each other is enormous, and we don't talk much about that from what I can tell. As a baby disciple, also a baby.
Are you new to disciples?
Well, sort of. That's okay. A somewhat long story. I grew up going to a disciples church camp and a disciples congregation, but I went to a disciples congregation that feels now very out of covenant with a lot of disciples values. So like I didn't really get what being a disciple was until going to church camp, but that was like this one really intense weekly experience out of the year. Then spent some time in other places and came back to disciples right around when I came to seminary. So like I am both been part of disciples for a long time and what feels like a very short time.
Yeah. Well, just like all the talks, we didn't solve anything, but maybe we know a little bit more. So thanks for chatting with me about this and helping me to process it. These books were really helpful. Hidden Histories in the United Church of Christ, Barbara Brown, Zickmund, and yeah, some of the articles I found online. And we'll share that PDF that Leah is sharing with the world about denominational responses to the Black Manifesto, because I find that very informative. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.